Braced for impact, red alerts are in place as Britain counts down to Storm Ciarán. Heavy rain and winds of 100 miles per hour set to batter parts of the country. Flights and trains are already cancelled amid threats of widespread flooding, with official warnings of danger to life.
Last night was a sleepless night. Tonight's going to be a sleepless night. We're doing all we can. We've got sandbags. We're boarding up the windows, and it's just really hoping now.
We have reporters around the country as Britain battens down the hatches ahead of what could be the worst storm since 1987. Also tonight, hundreds flee Gaza as the Rafah crossing opens at last. Foreign nationals and the badly injured are the first to escape into Egypt. Here, more damning evidence at the COVID inquiry. Tales of a toxic macho culture in Downing Street, with even the most senior women undermined and ignored. Day 2 of the royal visit to Kenya and a special encounter for the Queen. Plus, the teenage climber already scaling the heights ahead of the Olympics.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. Britain is bracing once again for strong winds and heavy rain as Storm Ciarán threatens a danger to life in some parts of the country. In the last hour, the first Met Office weather warnings have come into force. They'll step up, covering more of the UK in the coming hours. Some of the worst conditions could be seen in the Channel Islands. Forecasters in Jersey have issued a red warning with expected gusts of up to 100 miles per hour. Across the country, transport will be disrupted and power lines could be damaged. We will have the latest from all our reporters along England's south coast and in Jersey, as well as in Northern Ireland, where there's already been significant flooding. First, though, let's go to Chloe Keedy in Exmouth in Devon. So, Chloe, how are preparations going where you are?
Well, Mary, the rain's really started coming down heavily here just in the past few minutes, almost right on cue. The first of those weather warnings kicked in here about half an hour ago, a yellow warning for rain. And of course, right across the UK, this rain over the next couple of days is going to be coming down onto ground that is already heavily saturated. And of course, that brings with it a risk of flooding. The amber warning for wind, the first of those amber warnings, kicks in here at about 3 o'clock in the morning. We're expecting in some coastal areas gusts of more than 80 miles per hour. So I think people here are wondering, understandably, what it is they're going to wake up to in the morning.
In Newry, in Northern Ireland, they're already feeling the effects of extreme weather. Both streets and shops here are submerged. The damage to businesses is devastating.
I don't even know when we'll get to reopen again, if we get to reopen. Definitely a lot of the equipment, the machinery has been, damaged beyond repair.
But what's been unleashed here is expected to be a fraction of the full force of Storm Ciarán. The Channel Islands are preparing to bear the brunt. The Met Office here issued a rare red alert, meaning that there's threat to life.
Last night was a sleepless night. Tonight's going to be a sleepless night. We're doing all we can. We've got the sandbags. We're boarding up the windows, and it's just really hoping now.
Sandbags on the outside and empty shelves inside this supermarket, a sure sign that people here are planning to stay indoors.
Those waves could generate, could sweep people off their feet, and they may carry debris. And so we urge everyone to stay well back from the water's edge.
Across the water on the Cornish coast, this was the calm before the storm. But these fishermen know only too well what's coming their way.
The winds with a high tide, the boats will start snatching, and that's when chains and ropes get snapped. If that happens, it's a bit of a problem, especially if it happens at night, because nobody can see what's going on.
This is what did happen the other night at the pub just up the road. The Ship Inn in St Austell is still cleaning up after its last flood just 4 days ago, and fear that the fallout from Storm Ciarán could be even worse.
The fridges have all gone down, the speakers blew, so they're now up and running. We've had obviously damage to chairs, to everything really.
Up the coast in Sidmouth in Devon, they're trying to get ahead of the storm and prevent flash flooding by flushing out the drains. While on Exmouth Beach, teams spent the day shifting 1,000 tonnes of sand to try and shore up their sea wall, which has a crack in it.
On Sunday, we heard that that the crack had come apart even more. Yesterday we did preparation, and today we're doing the work.
So it's a race against time.
Yeah.
And it's only a matter of time before Storm Ciarán arrives. All anyone can do now is heed the warnings and try to keep themselves safe. Chloe Keedy, ITV News, Exmouth in Devon.
OK, well, let's get more now from our reporters across the country. Emma Volney is in Jersey tonight. Rebecca Barry is in Newhaven on the coast of East Sussex. Worsening conditions expected there a little bit later. But first, let's go to Stuart Robson in Newry, Northern Ireland, where communities are still suffering from the flooding of recent days. Stuart.
Yes, Mary, it has been nothing short of a washout here in Northern Ireland over the last number of days. And have you just seen in that report, this city, Newry, has felt the brunt of it. It is home to the island of Ireland's oldest canal, but in the early hours of Tuesday morning, its banks burst and caused chaos on the surrounding streets. Now, as you can see, the water here has subsided. It's actually been quite a nice day here in Northern Ireland, which I can tell you is a rarity, but that has allowed business owners here to come and weigh up the damage that has been caused. Now, the clean-up operation is going to cost thousands for these businesses. Some have told ITV News that the clean-up cost just to get back on their feet could cost as much as £250,000. Now, they're calling for some localised help at a time when, of course, Northern Ireland has no functioning executive at Stormont. So this will be a Christmas run-in they certainly did not want.
Well, I'm standing in the most southerly tip of the British Isles where we're expecting gusts of around 100 miles per hour. There is a red weather warning in place, which is really as serious as it gets. All the airports are closed, the ferries have been cancelled, and the Channel Islands have effectively been cut off, which has inevitably led to people panic buying in the supermarkets. The messaging here from the authorities very similar to what we saw during the COVID pandemic, and that is to stay at home. This beautiful seaside town tonight preparing for a battering. All around me there are sandbags that residents are helping themselves to as they take matters into their own hands and build their own flood defences. Now, it may not look too bad now, but let me tell you, the wind is really whipping up and the sea is coming in thick and fast. This is an incredibly serious situation here. The authorities hoping for the best, but very much preparing for the worst.
Well, here in Newhaven, there's a brief pause in the rain, but tomorrow, along with much of the south coast, they are in line for very strong winds, up to 80 miles an hour in places. Behind me, you might be able to make out the port. Normally, there'd be ferries running from here to France, but they've all been cancelled until Friday morning as the eye of the storm is set to sweep across the channel. Meanwhile, further along the coast in Hampshire, the emergency services say they are moving into a major incident status from midnight tonight, braced for those potentially deadly floods and winds. The Environment Agency says that in coastal towns like this, large waves could be whipped up by the gales, while the heavy rain could cause rivers to flood inland. There are dozens of flood alerts and warnings in place all along the south coast. In fact, in the surrounding villages here, I have already seen roads and fields flooded, the ground saturated by the heavy rain we've already seen in recent days.
OK, Rebecca Barry in Newhaven, Emma Volney in Jersey and Stuart Robson in Newry. Thank you. And Alex is here with me in the studio. So, Alex, explain exactly what we are going to see then over the next 48 hours.
Well, let me first start by saying we saw the scenes there developing in the Channel Islands. It's the first time in my nearly 20-year weather presenting career that I've seen the shipping forecast actually mention hurricane force winds. We aren't going to get a hurricane, but it has been likened to it because the winds are going to be very strong indeed, and we're going to take a closer look at this in just a second. But let's start with the warnings that are in place as we head through this evening. And at the moment, there is a rain warning in place, and that covers much of the southern counties of England, all of Wales, and here we could see 30 to 40 millimetres of rain falling quite widely, maybe 60 to 80 millimetres in some localised spots, which would cause some impact. We've also got wind warning in place as well. And even as we head further inland, we could actually see the wind warning producing gusts up to maybe 50 to 60 miles per hour in some inland parts. But as we fast forward into tomorrow, that's when we see more warnings getting added. We're going to have another rain warning on Thursday being added up towards the northeast, but also the amber warnings for wind kick in across some parts of the south coast. And in the amber warning areas, we can actually expect gusts of between maybe 70 to 80 miles per hour, but they could be even stronger. And as we know, the Jersey Mets have actually issued a rare red warning. So for the Channel Islands, we could see gusts up to 100 miles per hour. This would cause storm surges. We are expecting to see some flooding here. Waves could be as high as 30 feet.
OK. Alex, thank you for the moment. We'll get a full forecast from you a little bit later in the programme. OK, but in the meantime, let's move on now to events in the Middle East, where a key gateway out of Gaza opened up today as Israel continues its incursion into the region. The Jabalia refugee camp was hit by airstrikes for a second day running, and the fighting is taking its toll. The IDF says 10 of its troops were killed yesterday. 8,700 Palestinians have been killed so far, according to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry. But a small number of the injured, as well as some foreign nationals, were able to escape the Strip today for the first time since the war began. They left through the Rafah crossing along Gaza's southern border with Egypt. And while we've been on air tonight, it's been confirmed that some British nationals were among them. Our senior international correspondent John Irvine has sent this report.
Escape from Gaza for a chosen few. Around 80 injured people and a few hundred foreign passport holders got through the Rafah crossing and into Egypt today. As humanitarian concessions go, it's very little. And given the war is almost 4 weeks old, it's happened very late. Concessions were required from Israel, Hamas and Egypt, an act of mercy, but given the head count, not much of one. The battle for Gaza as seen from the turret of an Israeli tank. These are pictures released by the Israeli Defense Forces. The images suggest they are still fighting on the outskirts of the big urban centres, the built-up areas where resistance will be at its fiercest. Hamas have also released footage of what they claim are fighters emerging from a tunnel to attack Israeli armour. The aftermath of the deadliest airstrike of the war so far. 75 years after its creation during the first Arab-Israeli war, Gaza's biggest refugee camp, Jabalia, was hammered from above both yesterday and today. Scores of people have died and hundreds more have been injured. The fact that some of the Israeli bombs being dropped are powerful enough to destroy tunnels has increased the danger for civilians living above Hamas's underworld. Israeli incursions into Gaza normally last just days, but they're saying this could go on for weeks, even months. The big question is, how long will the Americans in particular tolerate it? The window of legitimacy conferred on Israel by Washington may not stay open long enough for Israel to achieve its goals. The empty streets of Gaza City, but this doesn't mean it's deserted. Thousands are sheltering in hospitals. Safety is preventative medicine at its most basic. Corridors have become living spaces, so have lifts. This footage has been released by the Iranian-backed Houthis fighting for control of Yemen. They claim the drones and rockets were fired at Israel, which is reporting interceptions near the Red Sea resort of Eilat. These are Hamas rockets being intercepted over Tel Aviv, but despite Israel's umbrella of defences, some of the projectiles do get through. This, of course, is nothing in comparison with what Gaza has endured and is yet to endure. John Irvine, ITV News, Southern Israel.
Well, let's get the latest from our global security editor, Rohit Khatru, who is in Tel Aviv tonight. Rohit, there's been an update, as I understand it, in the last few minutes about British people crossing the border, the crossing at Rafah.
Yeah, we've just heard, Mary, from officials at the Foreign Office who say that the first British nationals have just crossed the Rafah border. So crossing from the Gaza Strip into Egypt. The Foreign Office add that they're updating British nationals who are registered with them about the situation from now. And they say that although only a few British nationals have crossed, there will be further time-limited periods in which more British nationals can cross in the coming days. So, yes, a significant moment.
And Rohit, in John Irvine's piece, we saw this incredibly serious situation, obviously still ongoing in Gaza. What is happening with Israel's advance there, the operation? What's happening?
Well, Mary, in short, we can't tell for sure. We're trying to piece together a picture based on official statements, based on what we're seeing on social media as well. But it does appear that the Israeli operation is advancing. The one division put out a statement in the last couple of hours saying that some of their soldiers who had been operating within the Gaza Strip are, quote, at the gates of Gaza City. So they believe they've reached the edge of the urban area of the Gaza Strip where the fighting will be fiercest. But we learned today also that the IDF say they've lost 9 soldiers, which gives you an indication of the intensity of the fighting likely to be ahead.
Rohit Khatru in Tel Aviv, thank you. Next, here, shocking allegations of a toxic macho culture in Downing Street, as detailed by one of Boris Johnson's most senior civil servants today. Helen McNamara told the COVID inquiry how women had been ignored and excluded inside government. She said that had fatally impaired decision-making during the pandemic, and she was scathing about the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, as Romilly Weeks now reports.
He was, next to the Prime Minister, the second most high-profile figure dealing with the pandemic.
I'm going to level with you.
Yet former Health Secretary Matt Hancock was today branded someone who couldn't be trusted in the biggest crisis in this country's recent history.
Could you give us your full name, please?
It's Helen McNamara.
His accuser, the most senior female civil servant at the time, was asked this.
That Mr. Hancock regularly was telling people things that they later discovered weren't true.
Yes.
In Helen McNamara's written evidence, this line. The Cabinet was told time and time again by the Health Secretary that we had plans in place. Yet those plans were never seen, and Miss McNamara's evidence revealed this extraordinary picture of what she called nuclear levels of confidence when she asked Mr. Hancock whether he needed extra support, and he said this.
He reassured me that he was, quote, loving the responsibility, and to demonstrate this, took up a batsman's stance outside the cabinet room and said, they bowl them at me, I knock them away.
I'm trying to explain just how jarring some of that was.
Around the middle of March, when COVID was spreading rapidly, Helen McNamara described a sense of dawning panic, running into the Prime Minister's study and saying, I think this country is heading for a disaster. I think we're going to kill thousands of people.
It was a sense of foreboding, like I hope nobody sitting in that office ever has that again, actually. It was a very, very scary experience, but I felt that it wasn't in any doubt in my mind at that point that we were heading for a total disaster.
Helen McNamara's tone was measured and forensic today. The picture that she quietly painted of Downing Street was anything but sexist, ego-driven, with a macho overconfidence displayed towards the pandemic and towards women who wanted to speak up with a Prime Minister who didn't even understand the science. As for Dominic Cummings, who described her in venomous, expletive-ridden WhatsApps in evidence yesterday, she had this to say.
It's horrible to read, but it is both surprising and not surprising. It's disappointing to me that the Prime Minister didn't pick him up on the use of some of that violent and misogynistic language.
The current Prime Minister, Chancellor of course at the time, told ITV News the culture now is different.
My Downing Street is a place where I think people are not just happy to work, they feel fulfilled, but that's the kind of culture that I want to create in any work environment.
Before she left, Helen McNamara stressed what she hopes is that the inquiry will ensure collectively that things are done better next time. What she revealed about government suggested they could hardly have been worse. Mr Hancock has said that he'll respond to all questions when he gives evidence. And on the impact, Mary, of that sexist culture in Number 10, Helen McNamara said that even caused problems with policy making, where there was more impact put on fishing and football than on shutting schools, pregnant women or domestic violence. As we're reminded almost daily at this inquiry, the dysfunction in Number 10 had very real-world consequences.
Normally weeks at Westminster, thank you. And if you have missed any of the bombshell revelations from recent days, you can catch up on our podcast. Tom Bradby and Paul Brand have what you need to know about the COVID inquiry. It's available now on our website and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, there is plenty more still to come in the ITV Evening News, including...
Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Tech billionaires and world leaders in Buckinghamshire to assess the impact of artificial intelligence. A toxic culture where predatory behaviour is normalised, a damning insight into the RAF's Red Arrows. And the long and expensive wait facing some newborns for a simple but very significant procedure.
I just think women should be able to do what they want. Parents should be able to feed their babies.
Infants born with tongue ties sometimes struggle to breastfeed and can go on to develop real speech difficulties. We'll have all of that and more after the break. See you then. Hello and welcome back. Elon Musk has said the world should hope for the best but prepare for the worst when it comes to artificial intelligence. He was speaking at a global summit in Bletchley Park, once the secretive base for Britain's World War II codebreakers. Today it was the setting for a new agreement signed by 28 countries, laying the groundwork for the safe development of the new technology. Our political correspondent Harry Horton has more.
Technology can indeed change the course of history.
Artificial intelligence, is it a threat to our future?
Uncontrolled advances in AI may lead to catastrophic consequences.
Or can it save humanity?
A revolution that is literally at everyone's fingertips.
It's these questions that have brought ministers from around the world to Bletchley Park this week as they consider how and whether to regulate AI. The big tech bosses here were warned about the threats AI could pose.
We must similarly address the risks presented by AI with a sense of urgency, unity and collective strength.
The Tesla and X owner, Elon Musk, says that risk could be existential.
The very worst could be, extremely bad, but I think the probability of extremely bad is low. I think the more we pay attention to it, the more we care about it, the more we minimize the probability of something going wrong.
Other AI entrepreneurs here don't want regulation to stifle innovation.
There are enormous, profound upsides that will make us healthier, educate us better, get us more green energy. But like any powerful technology, there will be the possibility for it to be misused. There will be the possibility for it to fail.
I think that some of us have been too focused on the 20 and 30-year threats that are a little bit inspired by sci-fi and Terminator and Skynet. And in fact, actually, there's a lot of much more practical near-term risks over the next 5 to 10 years, which everybody should be focused on.
The US Vice President joined the Prime Minister for dinner tonight. Both leaders announced they would open their own AI safety institutes. But how will this rapidly evolving industry affect people's jobs?
It's very hard to predict how the labour market will change as a result of the new technology. But history tells us that, of course some jobs will change, but overall, as technology makes things cheaper or makes us more productive, that's overall good for the economy and creates jobs over time.
Bletchley Park was where code breakers helped win the last World War. Rishi Sunak hopes this week's summit can help avoid a future war against the machines. Harry Horton, ITV News in Bletchley Park.
And our science correspondent Martin Stew is here. So a lot of emphasis today on the potential downsides, but also the potentials of the upside of AI.
Yeah, I mean, we all think of the downsides, as mentioned in Harry's report there, the Terminator, sci-fi stuff. There are much more real and short-term threats to jobs, to creativity, potentially to our identity as well. Deepfakes influencing the way we think, potentially even vote. But the flip side is those positives as well. So if you look at Bletchley Park, that's where Alan Turing broke the Enigma code. One bit of AI software that cost $7 to develop did it in 19 minutes. Take that skill set, apply it to something like healthcare, and the possibilities are endless. Just today, the Royal Marsden said that using AI, they could be twice as effective at identifying how aggressive certain types of cancer can be. So the possibilities are endless. But behind all this, you've got to remember that AI gets smarter and more sophisticated at an exponential level. The curve does this. So for our understanding and legislation to stay ahead of that curve is going to be really difficult, but we need to do that in order to get the good stuff, but protect ourselves against the bad stuff.
Fascinating. Martin, thank you. And there is more from the exclusive interview with the Prime Minister we saw a little bit earlier on the programme on tonight's episode of the Peston programme. That's at 10:45 on ITV1 and 11:05 on STV. Let's have a look at some other news now. And a third man has been jailed for a knife-point robbery at the home of the Olympic cyclist Mark Cavendish. Mr Cavendish and his wife Peter said in a statement they kept reliving the events of that horrific night in November 2021 when a balaclava-clad gang armed with knives broke into their home. Today, Joe Jobson was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Northumbria police have arrested 2 more people over the felling of the iconic Sycamore Gap tree. 2 men in their 30s were held on suspicion of criminal damage and have since been released on bail. And house prices had the biggest monthly rise in October for more than a year, according to the UK's biggest building society nationwide. The 0.9% increase has been linked to a shortage of homes on the market. Now, they're meant to be the pride of Britain, giving daring displays for the grandest of state occasions. But new reports claim sexual harassment and bullying was widespread and normalised within the Red Arrows. Now, that's prompted an apology from the very top of the RAF. And our correspondent, Sejal Karia, is at the Ministry of Defence tonight. So, Sejal, what kind of behaviour, then, was described in this report?
Mary, these 2 reports expose a culture of sexism, bullying and harassment that was allowed to flourish in the RAF's Red Arrows unit, a team that is world famous and that is the top aerobatics unit. But it was where female personnel were subjected to unwanted contact, invitations to have sex and sent unsolicited out-of-work messages. One report said that there was a culture of male sexual entitlement, with women being viewed as property, behaviour that went unchallenged, meaning women serving in the team often banded together in social situations to protect themselves. The RAF said it was the fact that the team was high profile and had regular contact with VIPs, celebrities and an admiring public that some personnel felt that they were special, that normal rules and behaviours didn't apply to them. 2 male pilots were fired last year. 9 other personnel have been subject to disciplinary action. The chief of the air staff said the behaviour was unacceptable, it was widespread and normalised on the squadron. And he said while the unit's reputation has been damaged, there are no plans to disband it. He also offered his unreserved apologies to everyone affected.
Sejal Karia at the MOD, thank you. Now, you are watching the ITV Evening News. It's just gone 7 o'clock, and here's what's still ahead before Emmerdale. An inquest reveals the cause behind the death of the late Sir Bobby Charlton. The orphaned animals that received a very special guest. Robert De Niro under a different kind of spotlight, entangled in a legal battle against his former assistant.
Toby Roberts is going to become an Olympian.
And the teenager reaching new heights on his way to making history at the Olympics.
And Storm Ciarán is set to batter southern parts of Britain, with the Channel Islands preparing to be hit with possible gusts of 100 miles per hour. I'll have more a little later in the programme.
That's all still to come, but first, how some parents are having to wait up to 5 months for a simple but significantly effective procedure for their babies. Infants born with tongue ties sometimes struggle to feed and can go on to develop speech difficulties as they grow older. There is a quick operation that can help, but waiting times vary hugely across the country. In some cases, ITV News found it takes more than 20 weeks for a baby to be seen. That leaves some families forking out hundreds of pounds to go private, and where that just isn't an option, mothers are being left sometimes heartbroken as they're forced to bottle feed their newborns. Our reporter Amy Welch explains.
So can you see here that piece of skin called the frenulum? Yeah. So he's quite forward in baby's mouth.
Baby Ted was born with a tongue tie. It means the skin under his tongue is shorter than it should be, which restricts movement and makes it harder for mum to breastfeed.
It affected how he's latching onto your breast and how efficiently he can draw the milk from the breast.
Invited me over to meet him, did his weight, and then she just said he's got a little tongue tie. We'll see how he feeds, and if it's a problem, we can do something about it.
But it was from the first feed that I ended up getting really sore because he wasn't latching properly.
It's not known what causes tongue tie, but 1 in 10 babies are born with one, and around half may need a division, which means cutting the connected tissue beneath the tongue. Data obtained by ITV News shows an average wait of 2 weeks, and the NHS tells us you'll wait more like 9 if you've left hospital. So Ted's parents have instead paid £200 to go private.
We probably wouldn't still be breastfeeding if it was going to be 2 weeks. That I definitely would have given. I've already nearly tried to give up, and he's only not even two days old yet. Yeah. So yeah, we definitely wouldn't still be breastfeeding at all.
What are we building?
A house. When Kate's boy June was born, that wait was even longer.
I think they downplayed it a lot. It felt like, oh yes, he will be dealt with, so it's probably going to be around 6 months, but he'll be fine.
She didn't have the spare cash to go private and ended up bottle feeding.
I was heartbroken really, because I always felt that the best way to bond is to breastfeed.
And said to the snail with the itchy foot, "Be quiet, don't wriggle."
Now aged 3, June didn't end up getting a division and still has a tongue tie.
You can actually see how short the muscle is. He can't put the tongue to the top of the roof of his mouth. He has got a lisp, so he has problem pronouncing some of the words, some of the letters.
The NHS wait for a tongue tie division really depends on where you live. In Wolverhampton, most babies are treated within a week, but down the road in Dudley, some mums wait more than 5 months. And of the 22,000 babies diagnosed in the last year, only 3,000 ended up having the procedure through the NHS.
Really, everybody should have free access for tongue-tie division around the country, and that should be a government goal, whether you can afford it or not.
But for many mums, paying out hundreds of pounds to go private isn't an option, and this tongue tie centre in London is trying to bridge that gap between the NHS and private practice by being the first place in the country to offer a donations clinic, which means families that can't afford to pay don't have to.
I don't vet whether they truly can afford it or not, and we get a really good balance of people who probably could have gone private, but they pay it forward, and so we get to see more people who really truly can't afford it.
Baby Rose's division cost £300 but didn't properly heal. So now she comes here, where there's no mention of money.
She gave us a load of exercises to do, which were tricky, but they've got easier because Rose has got used to them. So we have to put our fingers in her mouth under her tongue and like lift her tongue up at the back and at the front. And there was a lot of scar tissue left from the tongue-tie division that needed massaging.
Well done, beautiful.
There needs to be a lot more support for breastfeeding in general, but particularly with the knowledge about tongue-tie. I had no idea how common it was. I just think women should be able to do what they want. Parents should be able to feed their babies.
Breast or bottle, how you feed your baby is a very personal choice. And although the government have invested £50 million on infant feeding services, mums like Ellie are still having to either pay or wait for a procedure which can so often make all the difference. Amy Welch, ITV News.
And there is more from Amy online, including details of services offering practical and emotional support with feeding your baby. And that is at itv.com/news. OK, well, let's get an update now on what's making the news tonight. Much of the country is bracing itself for extreme weather with warnings that Storm Ciarán poses a danger to life. Amber warnings are in place for the entire south coast of England, while winds could reach 100 miles an hour on the Channel Islands. Hundreds of foreign nationals and injured Palestinians have arrived in Egypt from Gaza. Follows the reopening of the Rafah crossing. Some of those who crossed over are British. And at the COVID inquiry, there were more damaging insights into Boris Johnson's premiership. One of his most senior civil servants at the time alleged a toxic macho culture inside Downing Street, with women often ignored. An inquest has heard that Sir Bobby Charlton, the legendary World Cup winning footballer, died following a fall at his care home. The 86-year-old's death last month sparked tributes right across the sporting world. And Ellie Pitt is with me now. And more details about Sir Bobby's final days.
That's right, Mary. The inquest heard today that Sir Bobby Charlton had been living in a nursing home for patients with dementia since July this year, where the manager told the inquest that he needed support with all aspects of daily living. The coroner heard that last month, as he was getting up from a chair, he lost his balance, and as he fell, he hit a windowsill. Now, staff performed a full body check at the time and they didn't notice any visible injuries, but they did later call paramedics when they spotted some swelling in his back. He was then taken to hospital where it was discovered that he'd fractured his ribs. Now, the inquest heard that Sir Bobby had an extensive medical history, and so doctors decided then to place him under end-of-life care, and he passed away 5 days later. The coroner concluded that his death was accidental and the cause of it, trauma in the lungs, a fall and dementia. There has been a huge outpouring of love and affection for Sir Bobby Charlton. Of course, the World Cup winner, England star, who spent most of his career at Manchester United, and outside Old Trafford, underneath the statue of him, there are so many scarves and flowers. Fans can pay their final tributes to him on the 13th of November. There's going to be a procession through Manchester to the cathedral where there'll be a memorial service for the late Sir Bobby Charlton.
Much loved. Ellie Pitt, thank you. Now, police are continuing to search the father of the Liverpool footballer Luis Diaz, who was abducted in Colombia on Saturday. The winger today issued an appeal on social media after his parents were kidnapped from a petrol station in the northern town of Barrancas by armed men on motorcycles. Diaz's mother was rescued by police within hours and has since joined a march demanding her husband's release. Next, it is his first Commonwealth visit since the death of his mother. And today the King came face-to-face with elephants who'd lost their mums. The royals toured an animal sanctuary in Kenya where Queen Camilla got hands-on at feeding time. Our royal editor Chris Shipp has been travelling with them.
It's the food their mothers would have given them, but these elephants are orphans and without a mother. They get their milk a different way. It's why the King and Queen came to Nairobi National Park this afternoon, to a place which saved the lives of these beautiful but very young elephants. Since the founder of this charity proved 40 years ago it was possible to rear baby elephants, they have raised 320 of them. The youngest right now is just a year old, and when they're brought to this centre, they need lots of care.
Or replicating something that the mother would have done because the babies we're taking care of are orphans, and so they've lost the mummies. And we have to come in and show them all the love, all the care, all the protection, and all the feeding that the mother would have done. So we are like the nannies.
Senior royals often experience things many others don't, but even a queen knows when she's doing something just that bit special.
Poaching in the ivory trade remains a problem in Kenya, just as it is in many parts of Africa. The fact that this centre right now has 120 orphaned elephants who still need to be fed milk shows you just how serious this problem remains.
And poaching is not the only threat they face. Rapid urban growth, this park borders the outskirts of Nairobi, puts pressure on their natural habitats. And then there is climate change. Longer droughts mean less water. Less water means more orphaned elephants. As Prince Charles, this king has campaigned on climate change for 50 years, and today he announced he is going to this year's UN Climate Summit, COP28. You might recall at the last summit, COP27, Liz Truss, the then Prime Minister, told the king she didn't want him there.
Left unchecked, global warming, biodiversity loss and climate change are challenges, serious challenges, which threaten us all.
Back in the national park, the orphaned animals are not just elephants. They rescue rhinos as well, who face the same kind of threats. And for this one, any trouser leg is good for a nibble, no matter whose they are. Chris Ship, ITV News, Nairobi National Park.
The actor Robert De Niro has been in the spotlight with an unfolding lawsuit in the United States. But this is no Hollywood courtroom drama. He has been forced to deny all too real claims of being abusive and demeaning to his former assistant. Well, our entertainment reporter Rishi Davda is here. And it is, even by Hollywood standards, pretty extraordinary showdown, isn't it?
Yeah, this court case is getting fairly fiery. You've got two-time Oscar winner Robert De Niro yelling "shame on you" towards his former assistant in the courtroom. That assistant, Graham Chase Robinson, is suing the actor for £10 million for emotional distress and reputational damage, which she claims means she can't get a job and she'll never recover from the trauma of working for Robert De Niro. She was earning £250,000 a year while she was working for him. The case began at the start of the week, and Robert De Niro was accused of things like using the toilet while on the phone to Robinson, asking her to scratch his back with her hand and calling her a brat, amongst other things. He insists he was never abusive towards her. He said, yes, I may have been upset with Robinson, I may have berated her, but I was never abusive. And this case has kind of pulled back the curtain on what was a seemingly peculiar relationship between Robert De Niro and Graham Chase Robinson. Interestingly, De Niro, who's known for The Deer Hunter and Raging Bull, is actually suing Robinson too for about £3 million, claiming that she stole his air miles and used the company card to buy food for personal use, and also spent hours binge-watching Netflix while supposedly at work. Now, lawyers claim that the lawsuit is full of false allegations. The whole thing is going to take a couple of weeks to play out in a court in New York. I'm sure there's going to be plenty more interesting bits to come out in the next few days.
It'll be a blockbuster movie, no doubt, at some point. Rishi Davda, thank you. Still to come, from Surrey to the summit of international sport. The 18-year-old going for gold at the Paris Olympics. And Alex will be back with the latest on Storm Ciarán, with it set to make landfall tonight. And do join us for all that and more after this short break. And welcome back. More now on the latest with the weather, with warnings coming into force very much across the country tonight. And Alex is back, and this is a busy couple of days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be very busy. As I say, all eyes on the forecast, and Storm Ciarán is fast approaching. In fact, we can take a quick look at the scene in Exmouth in Devon at the moment. You can see the rain has already started, but it is going to intensify here as we head through the next few hours. And as we know, there are weather warnings in place. In fact, several warnings in place as we head through the next couple of days. In fact, warnings are in place until Friday for rain and wind. The difference between Storm Babette and Storm Ciarán is going to be the wind, which is going to be very strong. Let's take a look at the details right now.
First thing today will be lovely and warm, and by breakfast time, it could be on the sunny side. Heinz tomato ketchup, no added sugar and salt, sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, here's a quick reminder of what we're expecting as we head through the next couple of days. We're talking about gusts of between 70 to 80 miles per hour on the southern coast, but they could be even stronger, as we've been hearing throughout the programme. And even as we come a little further inland, gusts of between 50 to 60 miles per hour are possible, and that would be strong enough to cause some destruction in places. So as you can see, we've got these amber warnings in place as we head into tomorrow along the south coast. But as I mentioned, if you're watching earlier in the programme, we've got this red warning, which was issued by the Jersey Met Office, and that is for gusts of between 90 to 100. And that certainly would cause some storm surges. We're talking about waves possibly as high as 30 feet, causing flooding. I can't say this enough, please do not go near coastal roads as we head through. And this is why. Look at Storm Ciarán. It's a very deep area of low pressure. It's going to produce very strong winds, but also some heavy rain as well. That could cause flooding in places. The combination of the rain and also high spring tides and the winds are going to make for a pretty bad recipe, I can tell you that. And that's why those warnings are in place. Do listen to them. They will save lives. This is the situation then as we head through this evening. You see that swirl there. That's Ciarán, and that's going to be heading its way further inland. And then as we head through the overnight period, it will start to shift its way further east and southeast and then start to make its way northwards. So as we start tomorrow morning, that is going to be pretty much the situation across all parts of the UK, waking up to windy conditions, as I say, the strongest along that south coast, with the Channel Islands we could see gusts up to 100 miles per hour.
Heinz tomato ketchup, no added sugar and salt, sponsors ITV National Weather.
As I say, please don't go near coastal roads along that south coast. There could be widespread flooding in places.
OK, so really be careful. All right, Alex, thank you. And finally, to the teenage rock climber reaching for the heady heights of Olympic success. Next year's Games in Paris will only be the second time that climbing has featured as a sport. And Toby Roberts, who's just 18, will be Britain's first male competitor. He told our correspondent, Geraint Vincent, how he got hooked and even offered a little lesson in the lingo.
Here comes the future of British climbing. Toby Roberts is the first British male climber to qualify for the Olympics. So across the boulders and up the walls in Paris next summer, he'll be going for gold.
You need to be really physically strong, you need to have good endurance, you need to be mentally strong. When you're faced in front of a boulder, you've only got 4 or 5 minutes to work it out, so you've constantly got to be thinking, how can I do this, how can I do this? I got the bug when I was only around 8 years old. I started at an after-school club. I put my name down on the sheet to try it one day, and the first time I ever went, I just absolutely loved it.
And what a moment! Toby sealed his Olympic place with a spectacular victory in competition in France over the weekend.
When I'm up on the lead wall, I'm not really thinking too much, so it kind of almost like a demon just takes over me, and then the crowd gets behind me, and I turn around, I like cheer, hype them up. Yeah, those moments are my favourite moments of the sport.
As well as being a world-class athlete, Toby is also a teenager. So of course he has his own YouTube channel, where there is a language all of its own.
What is a Mint Rock City jug?
Have
I got that right? I've got that right.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. A Mint Rock City jug. So a Rock City is a type of climbing hold, and a jug is like a good hold. So it's got like a big lip on it, and you can get in the back of it, and it's nice to hold. And mint just means like, yeah, it's nice.
Oh, it's
like,
good.
Yeah, mint. Oh, this is a mint hold.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And if a climb is properly savage, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I guess that depends on what you think. Properly savage climb just means a hard climb.
Okay.
I love hard climbs, so properly savage climb is a good thing for me.
How's your French?
Très bon.
In France next year, Toby could be a teenager with the world at his feet. Right now, a place in British sporting history is within his already impressive reach. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
Mint, as he said, and that's all from us for now. Tom will be here with tonight's news at 10 with all the latest on the weather, of course, but in the meantime, from the whole evening team, bye-bye.